Hey, I'm Chris Morell. I'm one of the co-creators of Verbs. Yesterday, I watched Nuno Maduro experience Verbs for the first time, and I thought it might be fun to go over the same sort of process that he did, but just with an eye towards how I might approach it using Verbs myself. So let's just jump straight into it. I have created just three basic commands here, add to do, complete to do, and list to dos. And we're just going to walk through first creating a very, very simple to-dos app, the basic way, the Laravel way. And then we're going to create the same thing using Verbs. So to get started, I guess we're going to create a new to-do model. I'm using Laravel Idea, so I'm going to use that to kind of speed things up a little bit. So let's create a model. We'll call it to-do. And for right now, it's going to just have one property called task, and we'll create the migration with it. So this is just going to create a table with an ID, with a task, with timestamps. Looks good to me, and we've just got a basic to-do model here. So I will migrate, and let's get started. So let's see here. We're going to start with this add to do command. So I've just got a to do add task. So let's grab that task. Yep, grab that argument. And we're just going to say to do create, and it's just going to be task is task. And honestly, we can just inline that and to do, and we can say like this info to do ID was created, right? So if all things go well, I can do artisan to do add, and yeah, hello world, or hello. To do one was created. Great. Okay. So then on the complete to do command, we're going to have to take an ID. So we'll say to do, or let's see, to do equals to do find this argument ID, and then just to do delete, and this info to do completed. Okay, so let's to do complete one. Cool. And then the last one is this list to dos command. So we're going to get all of our to dos, to do all, and we'll do this table. It's going to be what, I guess ID, and then task, and it's going to be to dos. I'm not sure. Is that maybe to dos to array, or I'm not sure if that works. A to do list. Well, we don't have any, so to do add 1 and 2, and then list. Let's see. Cool. It's got timestamps too. So, all right, let's just inline this. We'll just say to do select, and we just want ID and task, and then all. Is that going to work? No, because this needs to be probably an array. Okay. Nope. Method on all. Oh, now we need to do get. Okay, so here we are. We've got our list of to-dos. Looks great. So, okay, we've got our basic to-do app. That is pretty simple. But let's say that we now realize that we want to have like a done status so that we can show our to-dos that are done or not. So maybe we'll add a flag that's like all, right? And then we want to be able to say, I guess we'll create a migration. We'll add status to to-dos. And here we're going to do table string status. We don't need that. And we'll just do table drop column status. Okay. We'll migrate again. And now we have statuses on our to-dos. So now I can do we'll get it. We'll query our to-dos. We'll say when this option all, this is going to be, or I guess unless this option all, then where status is what? Pending, I guess. Yeah. We'll select our, I guess, ID and task and status. And now we can just put this down here. Okay, so theoretically that gets us our to-dos. Over here, we need to create our to-do with a status. So we'll say status is pending. And then in the complete to-do command, rather than deleting, we'll say to-do update. And we're going to set the status to done. Right? So theoretically, what happens when we do to-do list? Okay. Nothing, because all the to-dos in our database don't have a status. And we can look in Queryos over here. I've already installed Verbs, but we're not using it yet. So if we look in to-dos, right, we see that we have those two to-dos, but their status is not set. So maybe in our migration, we just say like to-do query update status to pending, do we call it? Or new? I can't remember. Pending. And we'll just roll back that last migration and then migrate again. Okay, so now theoretically, I mean, I guess we can look here. Now their status is pending, so when I do a list, yes. Oh, and in our table, let's see, we need to add a status column. Cool. So that's great. And we were able to fix the fact that we didn't have the status on our old to-dos. But, we can't see the to-dos that we already deleted, unfortunately. I guess if we had soft deletes, we could undelete them or something, but didn't do that. So the last thing that I wanted to implement is when I mark a to-do, I guess we should, let's see here. A to-do complete will complete number 2. And now if we list, 2's gone, but if we do all, it's back. Great. So the last thing that I thought was it would be nice to be able to see when we completed a to-do, right? So let's make one more migration, and we're going to add completed at to to-dos, right? Table timestamp completed at. We will need to make it nullable because the one to-do that we already completed doesn't, I guess we need it to be nullable no matter what. But we would need this to be nullable because that one to-do that we already marked as complete won't have a timestamp. So let's migrate again, and then let's go into complete to do. And what do we do? Here, we're just going to say completed at is now, right? And let's see, I guess in our list to-dos command, we'll just add a completed at column. And we'll get completed at, and let's see. So if we list everything, none of them are completed. But if I do a to do, or none have a timestamp, to do complete, and we complete 3, and now we list everything. Okay, that third one has a timestamp. So, okay, we built a very, very simple to-do app. And there's a couple little things that I want to point out here, which is as the requirements changed for our app, and as we added new features, the features kind of like took effect as we added them, which is how things usually go. But I want to just like call that out that, if we look here, this row doesn't have a completed at timestamp because when we marked that item as done, we didn't have that feature yet. And yeah, I could probably go in and backfill it. This is a very simple app, but in a lot more sophisticated cases, you don't necessarily have all the data you need to backfill, or it may be much more complicated. So, okay, here we are. Let's just get rid of everything, and we're going to start from the beginning again, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to do this whole thing using event sourcing. And we're gonna go through the same exact steps and just kind of look at how that progression works when we do things event sourced. So we're over here in our add to-dos command. What's the first thing we need? We need an event, right? So a verbs event to-do added, right? Okay, so we've got a to-do added event. And what does this need? This needs, I guess, public string task, right? That's all we did in the first time, so that's all we'll do here. So we will still use eloquent models. There's a way to do this using states, but I think just to keep things simple, we'll still use eloquent models. So let's create our model again. We're going to create to-do. We're going to create it just with task as our only property. We're going to create it with a migration. Okay. And let's see. That's it. So in our handle method, we will say return to-do create. And we're going to create it with the task, this task. Okay. And we will go in and we're going to actually add another property here. We're going to give it a public int called to-do ID. We're going to leave it null to start. And when we add a to-do, I think we can just say this to-do ID equals, we'll just set it up. And in this application, I'm going to use snowflakes. That's what we use in Verbs. We'll just do a snowflake ID. So if we didn't provide an ID, we'll just generate a snowflake before we save. And then down here, we will do actually an update or create. And first we will do ID is this ID, and we're going to update it to this task, right? Okay, so add to do command over here. What do? We do, and this is one thing that Nuno didn't know about in his stream, but if you return something, so if we go back to do added, because I'm returning a to do here, I can get the value of that if I commit immediately. So I can say to do equals to do added commit, and let's see here. We need to give it a task is this task or this argument task. That's going to give us our to do. So now we can say this info. And we'll say to do, and what did we do before? To do ID created, right? Okay, so let's see if this works. I don't know. So a to do add hello. Cool. Now that's a little weird. This is a long ID, right? That's because we're using snowflakes. Basically, snowflakes are an ID system that Twitter originally invented. It lets you have globally unique IDs without having to rely on like an auto increment value. And they tend to be very large. So if I do, another one, it's going to be another really long ID. But that's what we got. So let's go over to complete. And what are we going to do? Here, we're going to need a new event. So let's create an event called to do completed. To to do completed. And what do we need? We need an ID, right? So we'll say public int to do ID, if I can type. And then in our handle method, we will say to do find this to do ID, delete. Because remember, we're doing exactly what we did in our first round of building this app, right? So now we've got our to do deleted. We need the complete command. So we'll say to do completed commit. And what do we need? We need to give it the ID. So to do ID is this argument ID. And we'll just say this info to do completed, right? So now I will have to grab this a to do complete, and we're going to give it that. And let's see, type of to do must be int string given. Okay, there we go. So now we need to go over to our list command. And unfortunately, we want the exact same code, but we have to write it again. So actually, we can cheat and we can go into our local history. Okay, so we did table. And again, we'll get rid of the that. And we need to import that class. Okay, so a to do list. Okay, we've got our one to do. And if I a to do complete, and we give it the other ID, and a to do list, we've got nothing. And just to prove that we have nothing, let's just refresh this. There's nothing in this to-dos table. Okay, so this gets us through our first step. Let's go back and say that we want our done status, right? So we're going to do the whole thing. We're going to add a migration, add status to to-dos, right? And we'll do table string status. We won't give it a default. And we'll table column status. Okay. So if we migrate, let's think about what we're going to do. So when a to-do is added, in addition to setting the task, right, we set the status. Status is pending, right? Is there anything else we did? We wanted to add in the list command. So we're going to select status. And we'll show the status column. And now when we list, we don't have anything. All right. So this is where replays come in. Because we are storing the actual thing that happened, the to-do was added, we can go back in time and sort of change what we mean in our application. So if I do a replay, verbs replay, it's going to ask me if I'm sure, and I'm going to say yes. List, still nothing. Why is that? It's because we're still deleting in our delete. So complete to do command instead of, in our to do completed event, instead of deleting this, we're going to update the status to done, right? That's what we did before. That's what we'll do again. So now if we replay, let's see, and we list, okay, we've got two to-dos again. Again, what's happening is we're going back. We have these events. These events happened. The to-do was added and the to was completed. But we're essentially just changing what our application understands about those events. And the cool thing is, because we were storing the actual thing that happened instead of the result of what happened, now we have enough information to just go back and change what the result is. And now we're able to get those to-do items back that we marked as done, even though in the original implementation, we actually deleted them from the database. So let's just, to prove the point, let's do the last piece. Let's add the timestamp, right? So we're going to create one more migration, right? Add, what do we say? Completed at to-dos. And we're going to say table timestamp completed at nullable. Yep, that looks great. And table drop column completed at. We will migrate. Looks good. And let's think about what that means. So in our add, in our to-do added, let's see, anything there? We don't need anything here. In our completed, not only are we going to update the status to done, but we're also going to set completed at to now. And in our list command, we're going to get the completed at, and we're going to say this is when it was completed at. So let's go and list again. Let's actually get, right? We don't have any completed ats, but if we go back and replay and list again, now we have the completed at timestamp. And let me see, let me just go into this list command and just say this info now, just so that we can see that we actually, so it's, it's 143, and those were completed several minutes ago. And we even are able to capture that information because in Verbs, when you replay an event, it actually time travels for you to when the event originally happened. So when you do things like now, you get the timestamp of when the event originally happened, which is pretty cool. Obviously, there's a way to get around that if you need the current clock time, the wall time, but that's the default. So neat. What did we get? So we were able to do the same thing, and a lot of the steps were the same, right? We added some new migrations, we changed the behavior of our application, and we added that behavior into like the same file. It was a different file, right? If you think about it, our add to do command didn't really change at all, nor did our complete to do command. Those we just implemented once, and then we didn't really touch because all we were doing was changing what adding a to do or completing a to do means to our application. But other than that, we essentially made the same changes each time. But what is cool is we made those changes and we were able to retroactively update our application to reflect those new changes without losing any data, because we're storing what actually happened instead of storing the outcome of what happened. And I think that is one of the biggest aha moments with event sourcing, is when you start to realize that in a lot of ways, as developers, we are storing the wrong thing. We're trying to model, the world by storing just like a snapshot of where it is today. But where it is right now is not the whole picture, right? And so when you start to think about things in terms of how did we get here, you have so much more of the real picture of the information of your application, and you have just a lot more flexibility. And another thing that I think is kind of interesting, especially if you are a believer in the actions pattern, right? And I know that Nuno talked about that, maybe not in the most recent stream, but I know he's talked about it. The action pattern is really nice because you can sort of abstract out the unit of action in your application into its own thing. And whether you call that from the command line or whether you call that from HTTP context or inside of a queued job or wherever, that whole thing is encapsulated in one place. And Verbs takes that one step further, or event sourcing in general takes that one step further by saying, okay, we're actually going to make that the data model, right? not only are we extracting that out into an action, but we're actually abstracting it out into an event that records the action that took place. And it means that you get all the same benefits of the action pattern, but it also means that that action is memorialized so that you can go back and look at what happened and potentially decide to change the way your application behaves when that thing happens and make that change retroactively. So there are a lot of other interesting things about event sourcing and about verbs. We didn't talk about states really at all. We didn't talk about snapshots, which I know Nuno was asking about, which honestly right now inside of verbs is really just an implementation detail, although we plan to give the developer a little bit more control over how they manage snapshots. But I hope that this was sort of a useful overview of how I might go about building a simple to-do app in verbs, and kind of a demonstration of why that approach is valuable. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you.